So welcome to my presentation. Throughout this, we'll be looking to review the impact of coach education and what this has on leadership styles. So to apply some context, Hereford Academy are currently undergoing a bit of a shift in their coaching. 7 of the 9 coaches there are engaging in the Level 3 UEFA B licence. This is in association with the FA. All coaches are going along and sort of engaging with this new process, and it's really quite a unique experience for almost all coaches from an academy to go through the same process. To apply some context as to what they'll be learning and how this relates to leadership styles, I'll bring up the intended outcomes of the level 3. As you can see here, they're looking to refine your beliefs, your values, coaching and playing philosophy. And this is something that, from experiences of the level 3, has really been pushed and encouraged. Coaches are there now looking to really express and understand their own concepts of how to be an effective coach and what that might look like. So the aim of this study is simple. We're looking to assess the impact formal coach education has on leadership styles, compare perceived leadership styles to those that are observed, and gain perspective on the applied impact coach education has on practice. Essentially, we're looking to see if the undertaking of a level 3 by an NGB makes any difference to the leadership styles of the coaches that are engaging in it, and what this might look like and how these changes might look. Firstly, I think it's really important to define and understand what leadership looks like within coaching. As you see, there's loads of different definitions of this, and I think the definition of leadership really encompasses all of these. It's definitely a behavioural process in which we're looking to motivate and push our athletes forward. How this looks is very different in different contexts. I do really appreciate the fact that we're looking to develop, leaders are looking to develop this sort of vision and direction, and that is dictated by their behaviours and how they interact with their players, and essentially looking to be really positive in what they're trying to do. So how often is it sort of applied, and especially within youth development, the literature alludes to 3 styles really, and that's your transformational leadership, servant leadership and transactional. And these are 3 things that are seen across the academy, and we'll discuss that later. But transformational leadership is this really positive and uplifting experience to try and change the way that their followers are sort of thinking and engaging and motivating themselves, and really kind of trying to be positive in what they're trying to do, really positively uplift these athletes. Whereas servant leadership is much more focused around discussing and having these processes with the individuals, looking to push them forward and develop them, not necessarily worried about the team. It's more so developing these individuals. And finally, transactional leadership, which I'll refer to more as traditional approaches throughout this, as literature alludes to, is very much this contingent reward-based program where we're managing and mediating performance by picking up and highlighting mistakes, and where performance is going well, we're very much lackadaisical about it and we'll let it go. And they can sort of enjoy that moment, but when things go wrong, transactional leadership really kicks in. We'll look to correct, and it's very coach-driven. So secondly, it's important to gain an understanding of where literature sees formal education in terms of coach development. And I think with Nash, Braun, Horton and Robertson 2016, you can see 2 really contradicting pieces of literature. And it kind of highlights the fact that this coach education can be a great platform to develop and influence behaviours and relationships, and really sort of help develop this method where you can go and apply it pedagogically on the grass. However, it is kind of formal education and the CPDs and these coach development pathways can really be kind of looked at as a tick box exercise, and that kind of undervalues that information that's being received, and coaches can appear to sort of overtly be very reluctant to sort of take on that knowledge and internalise it. I think something that literature struggles to find is this causal impact of why behaviour changes and the influence of CPDs on that. And I think when you look at the wider impact of the issue, there appears to sort of be this lack of accountability when you leave the event, and it kind of highlights that tick box exercise. And I think organisations and institutions need to become more effective in mediating that learning and developing ways of ensuring that those that have just gained that certificate can then go and actively use and pursue that. Nelson, Cushion and Protac highlight that continued association with those who have experienced similar development experiences can sort of help monitor and develop those learning experiences of coaches. I think that's something that's really important, and within HFC it's something that is actually can be worked really well. There are 7 coaches out of 9 that are engaging in this platform, so that sort of discussion and that integration can really work well because everyone's going through the same thing. And finally, sort of Hills, Basegle and Jacob kind of discuss this lack of fidelity once leaving a CPD event, and it's something we alluded to earlier. And I think often they highlight that often misinterpretations can occur with sort of this lack of accountability once they leave. So it's sort of brilliant, we've got this knowledge, we're going to go and apply it, but it's not always right, and that application can be very poor, and with no one there to help mediate it, it then can become quite detrimental for a coach. So with that in mind, and leadership styles and the impact of formal education, it's important to kind of highlight where Hereford Academy was prior to the B licence journey. I think it was a very disjointed and sort of autonomously run, in the sense that it's my team, I do what I want with my team, you do your thing over there, I'm going to keep my information to myself, you keep yours to yourself. I think that the hierarchy within the club and the leadership within there was run and based more on how long you've been there as opposed to those in leadership roles. And I think there appeared to be quite a clear lack of cohesive strategy when it comes to leadership and when it comes to togetherness of an academy. And I think the perceptions of what good coaching was pretty poor. Results almost dictated how good of a coach you were perceived as. If you were winning more, that means that you're a fantastic coach. And I think the more and more we hear that, the more we know that's not always the case. Through sort of informal chats and discussions, the thoughts on UEFA B were very mixed. As you can see here are some sort of snippets of the conversations that we had. There are some that are there really looking to engage and develop. Some of them hadn't been on CPD events for years and they couldn't wait to sort of get involved and push themselves onto this next level and sort of enhance their coaching practice. Whereas others just saw it as the next stepping stone they needed to go through, the next hoop they needed to jump through to kind of just carry on. And some of them have been coaching for so long and at that level, which is a sort of sub-elite JPL level, that they almost felt that they were there. They didn't need to do it. It was more so, right, we're doing it so I can actually say I'm UEFA B coach, but I'm doing it anyway. Just get my B licence and I can crack on with it, really. So to break this down more, the method that this study sort of approached was this MLQ questionnaire, and it was adapted to make it shorter and simpler for the coaches. 6 of the 7 coaches were eligible for it, and they were all male. Initially, the method was going to be pre, during, and post intervention, and that intervention being the UEFA B. However, at this point in time, no coaches have fully completed the B licence, so it reduced it down to just being before the start of the B licence to during, and this will be addressed in sort of the future recommendations. And further to this, sort of session observations, informal discussions, and FA mentor discussions kind of help to really compile this collection of data. Okay, so moving on to the results section. This is sort of compiled of the MLQ, and loads of sort of discussions really that have informed this. So the types of leadership that were found through the observations were very much transactional leadership. As you can see, coaches appear to be quite dyadic with how they approach learning. They didn't really give players much ownership. They were very critical of mistakes and intervened. When things were going right, they kind of just let it flow. I think massive one from the observations was that these predetermined rewards were set. If you do well, you get in the team. If you do well, you win. And these aren't necessarily tangible rewards, but they're rewards that at the age group they're working with will allow them to sort of buy into that, I guess, reward process. It's quite clear that winning was a focus, and adopting developmental procedures were quite burdenous. They didn't really want to engage in these sort of modern approaches to development, whether that be adjusting their leadership style, whether that be adopting pedagogical approaches that encourage development. It's very much, we need to win, we need to get the result. What do I, as the leader, need to do to make sure these players get there? And I think that's where kind of everything stemmed from. It was this fear of not winning, forced them to be quite transactional in their leaderships because they wanted immediate results and they didn't want to have to worry about much else really. It just gives straight accountability. I told you to do this, you didn't do this, you didn't win, for example. However, at the centre of that, there was this real inherent care for the whole person and the player. And I think this approach to leadership come more so from the pressures of the club and the pressures of the environment, not necessarily sort of their own inherent way of leading. There was this inherent care for the person there, and I think, as you'll see later, was probably the reason why there was a shift or definitely a contributing factor. Some of the things I pulled out from the MLQ were definitely that I found really interesting was this really high scores in management by expectation and contingent reward. As you can see here, these were definitely things that relate to transactional leadership, and I think especially the contingent reward one where providing recognition rewards when others reach their goals, that is all 6 of the coaches putting forth for that. And I think it stems from a lack of understanding of what effective leadership looks like. And I think it's very much in pre-intervention, so pre-B license, it was very much based on an understanding that you get that recognition and reward when you reach what we tell you to reach. And this is quite clear in the management by expectation and contingent rewards, where we're looking at 9.6s and 10s. Something that was definitely a lot higher than other scores, and probably very true of the club at that moment in time. So during the intervention of the UEFA B, I think it was clear from the observations that were made that there is a shift in leadership styles to more so servant and transformational leadership. Coaches were providing a lot more freedom to their players, and they allowed this sort of a lot more discovery and player-led feedback. And I think that was directly translated from the level 3 and the changing in pedagogical approaches. And along with this, need to be changes in leadership. If you're encouraging player feedback and discovery and questioning and allowing each other to come up with these aims and goals for sessions, as a collective, you have to relinquish that power that comes with transactional leadership. And very much more so in a transformational style, where coaches discussing these visions, these aims, and looking to get that ultimate outcome, which was to win and to make the academy look good for the benefit of the organisation. This was developed as a team, as a group, and sort of the focus wasn't solely on the organisation. It was how can we uplift each other and individuals to push towards these goals and to really push them forward. I think especially servant leadership traits showed themselves more in the younger age groups. This sort of focus shift from team development to more sort of tailored environments for individuals. And this sort of awareness appeared to occur from discussions with the coach mentors, that they kind of highlighted that coaches weren't really aware that they're working with younger athletes, and that the aim is completely different to when working with your 16s, 18s, 21s. And that shift in awareness has allowed them to kind of completely change how they approach coaching to tailor that to that age. And I think that's very much so servant leadership, in the sense that they were noticing the needs of their individuals and adapting to that, and really just trying to get the best out of these individual 11, 10-year-olds to make them better players. And I think this sort of approach allowed for a better development of relationships between players and coaches, which is something that wasn't there before. When comfortable, coaches definitely exhibited transformational behaviours. And as we go on to discuss in the future recommendations, this sort of overall attitude of the coaches was completely different. They appeared to be confident, they were smiling, they were positive and challenging players. And that environment was completely different. And this almost like flow-like state come about with the players. And every goal they conceded mattered. And every goal they scored was massive. Almost like bragging rights. Everyone wanted to be better than the other person. And that in turn just pushes and drives on performance. Just pulling out a few examples here from the MLQ, we're looking at how these coaches are starting. You can see how they're starting to release control and how they're not getting comfortable with the same old. They're looking to push these athletes and really develop them. And I think for me, the whatever others want to do is okay with me. That little subtle shift there speaks volumes for how the environment is shifting. Because players are included in that process. Previously they weren't. They really weren't. And it was very coach driven. I think those subtle little changes, and as you can see here, they're not comfortable with just working at the same level, pushing them and developing these new ways of going about things and giving some personal attention, show that gradual change in the environment. Granted, it's not been polar opposites, but you can see the changes. Just looking here in their leadership behaviours and their traits, you can see that transformational leadership scores on average have gone up massively. Previously looking at 6.3s and 4.8s to now both moving into the 9s show that they're really placing value on inspiring these athletes through their leadership techniques. Now, as we look at the averages and compare the differences, we've just discussed how the 4Is, the transformational leadership, are starting to increase, and that's great to see. There are really some significant changes within this. And as you can also see here, we're looking at contingent rewards and management by expectation and how that's dropping. And that shows that there's not just this acceptance of the same old, and that we're not relying on rewards to motivate our players. Coaches are clearly developing their leadership techniques where the rewards aren't as beneficial. Granted, they're still high and they're still used regularly, but those subtle little changes over a long period of time should hopefully see that shift and change in culture. Reviewing the current coaches is something that becomes quite important, and assessing their leadership traits over this sort of 3-month journey. And I think it's clear that the academy is experiencing a shift in culture. And this shift involves loads of things involved in the coaching process. And this sort of reimagining of what true leaders look like, true coaches look like, is something that is going to develop and improve as they continue to grow their knowledge throughout their CPD journey. And something that has become really apparent is this area of accountability that is there, and seeing coaches perform things that aren't necessarily in line with the B licence learning. They are being pulled up on more. Granted, this is within the cliques that that coaches have formed, but there is still an area of accountability. Transactional leadership is very apparent still throughout the club. However, you can see that there is a shift that is occurring, and individuals are kind of changing and approaching their coaching very differently in how they go about leading. And it's a process that you can see that CPDs are having a clear impact of that. That influence of the FA is clear, and it has definitely been a trigger of change. But that change isn't sufficiently monitored. In situ visits throughout have occurred. However, I do not feel that is good enough to kind of monitor these changes in leaderships. Whilst it's clear that CPD is having an effect on each coach, the pedagogical changes are real and very clear. However, power and traditional leadership approaches are still there, and certain coaches that are feeling uncomfortable with the changes definitely exhibit more traditional and transactional approaches. And I think it is clear that this is a reaction to how vulnerable they feel trying new things, because you can see those coaches that were exhibiting more transactional leadership traits and more sort of power dominant leadership styles have started to tailor off and move towards transformational leadership styles and solely transactional styles as we push through that journey, because they're becoming more comfortable and they're engaging in that learning more so and applying that pedagogically. And those changes are massive in terms of individual growth and development. So in the future, I think there definitely needs to be a continued accountability of coaches, whether that be from the club directly or something that the academy sort of develop themselves. There needs to have that accountability that they're continuing to apply their learning from CPDs. Clearly defining that sort of what effective leadership looks like at different ages. Transformational leadership appears to work fantastic, and literature will allude to works fantastic with the under 16s, with the 18s, 21s at that intercollegiate level sort of age that would translate into British sport as your under 18s and under 21s. But however, the youngsters, the 12s, need a slightly different approach to leadership. So it's important to clearly define what we view, whether that comes from working with the FA coach mentors, whether that comes from working as an academy as a whole, what we're viewing as effective leaderships at those different ages. There definitely needs to be a more inclusive and safe environment for coaches where we can discuss and brainstorm ideas. And that's definitely something that needs to happen fairly quickly to ensure that accountability occurs throughout their practice. And continual monitoring of that CPD and the impact that it's having on leadership styles need to occur. Be really interesting to continue the knowledge of this study post UEFA B once it's finished, looking at how that's changed them from start to beginning, and maybe reapproach that within a year's time to see if that's still consistent. But thank you very much for listening to our presentation. Thank you to Hereford for allowing me to come in and work with the coaches. It's been a really informative experience, and I think it's clear to see that CPDs are instigating change. However, not necessarily continuing and holding that accountability, and the environment that one is within allows for greater accountability and greater changes, as opposed to just going on these CPD events. And finally, here are my references. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for listening.